Ever wonder if your brain stays sharp and quick at learning new things as you get older? This new study dives deep into that very question. So, what exactly is statistical learning, or SL? Imagine you are listening to a new language. You might not know any words, but your brain is constantly picking up on patterns, like which sounds tend to go together. That's statistical learning. It's like your brain is a super smart detective, finding clues and rules and patterns without you even trying. Scientists think this skill is super important for things like understanding language and even recognizing familiar objects. But what happens to this amazing ability as we age? Do our brains become less skilled at finding these hidden patterns? That's the big puzzle the researchers in this paper wanted to solve. They wanted to see if older adults could still do this kind of learning and how well, and whether their brains showed the learning in a different way than younger people. To figure this out, they used a pretty cool technique called fast periodic visual stimulation, or FPVs. Think of it like flashing a bunch of images really fast on a screen. But with a special twist, some images would pop up more often than others in a predictable pattern. While people watched these sequences, their brain activity was measured using EEG. This is like listening to the brain's electrical conversations. The idea is that if the brain notices the pattern that some images appear more often than others, it will show up as a specific signal in the EEG. It's a way to see if the brain is learning the pattern even if the person isn't consciously aware of it. They recruited older adults and a group of younger adults to compare. Both groups did these flashing image tasks while their brain activity was recorded. They also did some other tests to see if people could remember or recognize the patterns they saw. One of these was a classic visual statistical learning task, where people learn sequences of shapes. And here is where it gets really interesting. The brain readings, the EEG data, showed that older adults did pick up on those frequency patterns. Their brains responded to the less common images in a special way, just like the younger adults did. This means the fundamental ability to detect these statistical regularities seems to be preserved. But there was a difference. The brain signals in older adults were smaller in size. Think of it like detecting a faint signal versus a loud one. The signal was there, showing learning, but it wasn't as strong as in younger people. The researchers also found that a general brain response to the fast flashing lights was the same in both groups, suggesting the change was specific to noticing the statistical patterns, not just a general slowdown in brain activity. When it came to the behavioral tests, things were a bit different. While the brain clearly noticed the patterns, people weren't as good at showing they had learned them. Their performance on the memory and recognition tasks was weaker and more all over the place, especially in older adults. For example, they could often tell the difference between familiar words and new ones, but struggled more when the patterns were made of abstract shapes. Even more intriguing, there wasn't a strong connection between how well people's brains showed they learned the pattern on the EEG and how well they performed on the behavioral tests. It's like the brain was learning the pattern implicitly in the background. But that knowledge didn't always translate into clear, conscious recall or recognition. Interestingly, when they looked at the classic visual statistical learning task, they found that older adults performed worse than younger adults. And people who did better on this task also tended to do better on the behavioral tests where they had to discriminate between patterns. This suggests that this specific task, which involves more conscious effort and memory, is more sensitive to age-related changes. So, what's the big takeaway? The researchers propose a sort of split. Our brains might be really good at learning patterns automatically even as we get older. That neural sensitivity seems to stick around. But showing that learning behaviorally, be remembering or recognizing it on demand becomes harder and more variable with age. This might be because those behavioral tasks rely on other brain functions like immediate memory and attention, which can be more affected by aging. One important point they brought up is about how reliable these tests are. For some tests, especially the brainwave measurements, it was hard to get consistent results from one session to the next for the same person. This means that when they looked for connections between the brain signals and behavior, it was like trying to find a path through fog the wobbly results made it hard to be sure. This is a common challenge in this kind of research. And it means we have to be careful about drawing strong conclusions based on those weaker links. This unreliability in some tasks also means that our ability to see clear age differences or connections between brain and behavior can be limited. If a test doesn't consistently measure something, it's hard to see how it relates to anything else. Essentially, this study gives us a more detailed picture of how our brains learn as we age. It seems like the underlying machinery for picking up on patterns is quite resilient, but the way we express that learning through our actions and memories might be more delicate. This is important because it suggests that while the basic learning capacity is there, Supporting older adults might involve helping them leverage that capacity in ways that bypass or compensate for age-related changes in other cognitive areas. So, what does this mean for you and me, for starters? It's good news that our brains are still wired to learn patterns, even as we get older. It confirms that the brain is adaptable. However, it also suggests that if you're trying to learn something new, especially something complex, being aware that expressing that learning might take more effort, or different strategies as you age is key. The classic learning tasks that require a lot of memory and focus might be tougher, but the underlying ability to pick up on structure is still present. This research opens up questions about how we can best support learning in older adults. Maybe we need to focus on training those domain general skills like attention and memory, or develop new ways to test learning that rely less on conscious recall and more on implicit brain signals. Future studies could explore if specific training programs can boost the behavioral expression of statistical learning in older age, or if different types of stimuli or tasks could yield more consistent results. It's a reminder that aging affects different cognitive functions in different ways, and understanding these nuances is crucial. And that's the latest from the lab. If you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on aging and learning. And be sure to subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab so you don't miss out on our next deep dive into the fascinating world of psychology and neuroscience. Until next time, keep questioning and keep learning.